Right, so in this one, we're going to be writing our own custom Django admin commands or custom Django management commands. This is when I did something like python manage.py, run server, stuff like that. That's a command. That's a management command. So run server is one of them, create super user, migrate, stuff like that. Those are all things that we absolutely can make our own custom one. And the nice thing about this is then when we go live, we can know exactly what's going on as far as running certain commands. In our case, we're going to do refreshing the shortcodes. Again, I don't know how practical something like this would be in real use case, unless you had something like that default there, which is actually something we don't want. So we're going to leave it just like that. And in here, we're going to now go ahead and follow along with the documentation. That is how to custom management commands. You can just search Django custom management commands and you'd see something like this. But of course, we're not going to do everything that's exactly in here. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you how to do it. First off, we're going to make a new folder in here and we're going to call it management. So the new folder is called management. It's actually going to be a Python module. So that means we need to make a new file in here and we're going to call this init.py and make sure it's in the management folder. So we save that. We can actually close that out. We don't need that in there. And I'm going to make another new file in here. And this is going to be the name of the actual command. So I do python manage.py and I'll call it refreshcodes.py. That's going to be the name of the command that we actually run. But I need to put it in another folder called commands. And then in that folder, we do refresh codes. All right. We also need to put this into a Python module itself, so we'll put an init file in here as well. Save that and close that out. So going back into that documentation, that is what we just copied right here. So that's the structure as to what we've done. We have our app, which is right at the top level, and then we have our management, which is right here, and then commands and refresh codes. So we can come down and just kind of see and copy the one directly from their actual example, and this is how it is. We're not actually going to be using the arguments. We don't need to worry about that at this point, and I'm also not going to go with their handling of it. If you did add arguments, that gets a little bit more advanced, and it's just not something we're going to cover right now. All we're really going to do is actually update all of our models or refresh the actual shortcodes. So inside of this command, we actually need to import. Let's get rid of that import. We're going to import from shortener.models, import cur URL. And just the handle command will be, we're just actually going to return cur URL.objects.refresh codes. That's the name of the manager, refresh codes. We save that. And we're going to just say refreshes all cur URL shortcodes. That's what it does. We save it. We go back into the terminal and we do python manage.py refresh codes, one word. We press enter and we got cur URL manager has no attribute refresh codes. So let's double check to make sure that's what we called it. And we called it refresh shortcodes. Little mistake there. That's all right. And we go back, and now it refreshes those codes just fine. Every single time. Really simple. I can do it directly from the terminal line, and then if I was live, I can also do those things too. This command is actually really useful for many different reasons. Now, let's go ahead and add in an actual argument so we can see what it does exactly. And I'm going to go ahead and add in the, let's say, number. So, or recent or something like that. That is what I'm going to do. Number of arguments, I'm actually going to leave that out. I'll just say number, and then we'll go ahead and print out options. Okay, we'll save that, and now let's run it. And now what it's saying is that the following arguments are required, and that is number, right? So if I do it now, it's not going to do anything. If I hit 10, now it has some sort of thing actually working. Where notice it says number is 10. So the way this argument works, because I could add several other ones, like these are required arguments right here. each one of these is going to go in sequence or in order. So number 1, 2, 3. So I save that. I run it again. I got 10. So 11, 12. So if we see in the options, we see number 2 is 11, number 3 is 12, and number 1 is 10, right? As the order indicates here. There is a way to do named ones, which you can see right here. These are how you do named ones, but we're going to stick with just the number here. So I'll say, how about we just say items, as in the number of items or the number of shortcodes that we actually want to refresh. So how do we do this? Now back into our model manager, I can come in here and say items equals to, so the number of total items that we actually want to work with. And I'll just say, let's say 10 as a default or 100 as a default. Doesn't really matter. So now I can say items equals to options, and we called it items here, right? So that's going to come off of that option itself. Of course, the default option is 100, so whatever that is going to come through. So now if I do this, I'm going to come into my shortcodes and say print items. We save that, and let's go ahead and run it. And we don't need 10. We don't need all of those. Now we just need 10. Notice it prints out the items. It's actually still printing out the options. We don't need that anymore. Save that again. Do it again. And now it's printing out the items. Not, of course, not from the actual command, but from the model manager itself. We said 10. It came through as 10. So what if we wanted the most recent 10? That would be the ID that would actually change how the actual particular ID is coming through from the most recent 10 items that are in here. So to do this, we can just come in here and say if items is not equal to 100, or whatever number we put here, or we could also just say none. Let's just say none. So if items is not none, then, and we want to say, make sure is instance of, so we'll say items and int. I'll explain that in a second. We'll do QS equals to QS.order by, and we're going to do the ordering of negative ID. What this does is reverse the query set based off of the reverse order of the IDs. You can also use URL here, so that would reverse alphabetical order of the URLs. And this is now reversed of ID. And then we just do curly or brackets and then items. And again, this is all Python related list stuff. So this would take up till the last 10 items. So that actually changes our query set. This isInstance method is a built-in Python method that's checking that the variable that we're using is of the class integer. So it is an actual integer. Otherwise, there would be some errors here. So I come back in here, change this, and now what we should see is this changed ever so slightly, and I refresh that again. What I do see is something happened. I don't actually see the order correctly. So let's actually change the print shortcode to print ID, and that way we can refresh in here. We see 5 coming through first versus 1 coming through if we went by the default, which if I change that back to just ID, which is the default, that's how I'll do it. I can also change the ordering of things directly inside of the model itself. So I can come in here and say class meta, and I could do ordering equals to reverse ID or reverse URL or something of that sort. So in this case, I will not actually do that. But if you do that, make sure you save it and run migrations. Just wanted to mention it because there's 2 ways to order. This will order it directly on the query set regardless of what's going on here. This is basically just the default. Okay, cool. So that's it for what we did here with these custom actual management commands. It's really cool on all the different things that we can do, as well as adding in these arguments in here that just add another level of dynamic help when it comes to running some of this stuff, right? And this is refresh codes. This is now requiring it to be an actual item here. So if I add these 2 dashes and we just do refresh codes, I no longer get the error. So I could just do dash dash items, and I can say 10, And then this time it actually does refresh them, as we could tell by the change of the ordering. This just gives me that actual optional value for items. And if I try to do items ABC or something like that, it's not going to let me because it's not an integer. And I do have an extra check for that right here to make sure it's also an integer. These sort of things that you might not intuitively do while you're working through this on your own, but it's just stuff that you will learn about as you go forward, just to have just kind of sort of systematic checks that prevent errors in the long run. That's all that I did there, and that comes over time and working with enough stuff and really just kind of taking note as to how this is actually designed, and also why I did that specifically, just to prevent errors. That's it. You know, it's only to prevent errors, both on actually the model manager as well as the command. Okay, guys, well, thanks so much for watching, and this is it for the command stuff. Now we actually need to start doing some things with the reversing, or at least the handling of these models, right? So we have them now created. How do we handle the URLs? How do we actually set up something for our app to take in that URL and then redirect us somewhere else? So we'll do that very soon. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, see you in the next one.